You're listening to WKDW Radio 97.5 and KDWRadio.com, broadcasting from the Bishop West Real Estate Mobile Tower right here in Northport, Florida. And today I have a very special guest in the house, Mr. Dave Jenkins. And he just happens to be up in the Washington, D.C. area. And we're going to talk to you guys a little bit about his organization. Dave, would you like to do a quick introduction of yourself and maybe some background?
Yeah, thank you. I'm president of the organization Conservatives for Responsible Stewardship. And we're pretty much what the name says. We're conservatives who care about conservation and stewardship. We have 20,000 members nationwide and 6,000 members in Florida. We've been around quite a while, and we think it's it's not an accident that conservation and conservative come from the same root word. So we're talking about a number of issues in Florida, and right now we're really concerned about some utility stuff going on.
So let's first off, I want you to go ahead and give your website for people listening on the radio in case they want to see what's up when they get home.
Sure. It's www.conservativestewards.org, and it's for people that are watching. It's scrolling at the bottom of the screen there. So
absolutely, yeah. Thank you so much, Dave. So tell us a little bit about what you're talking about with utilities.
Yeah, well, this past fall, all three of Florida's biggest utilities, FPL, Florida Power and Light, TECO, Tampa Electric, and Duke, all requested and received approval by the Public Service Commission to increase their customers' electricity rates by record amounts. And for an example, FPL customers' bills starting this month will be going up by $15 to $20, on their bill each month. And part of our concern is that these are monopoly utilities, and there's no free market competition here.
No.
Each monopoly utility has a captive customer base. If you're an FPL customer and you don't like their service or you think they're charging too much, you can't decide to switch over to Duke or TECO or anybody else. So these utilities, they're pretty much able to do whatever they want with you in terms of, and the bigger issue really in that regard is that the Public Service Commission operates essentially like a rubber stamp. Every single time they go and ask for a rate increase, they get it. And where does this end? We really need independent, folks overseeing these big monopolies.
How does that get corrected?
Well, pressure on the governor to appoint people that will be independent, or pressure from the governor on the PSC as it's currently constituted, on those members to not just simply be a rubber stamp for the utility. But the legislature is pretty much a rubber stamp for the utility as well. So especially FPL, so there's a lot of work to be done there. One thing we're really concerned about right now is that it's not enough that FPL has raised your rates by record amounts. Now they've had a piece of legislation introduced that pretty much precludes your only real opportunity to get out from under their thumb, which is if you put rooftop, solar panels on your home. That's really the only way you can make a dent, and and using less electricity, of course, but make a dent in your electric bill. And so right now, if you have rooftop solar, you're able to get compensated by the utility for the power that you put back onto the grid. Like if you make more energy than you use, you can send it back to the grid, and FPL or Duke or whoever has to pay you a wholesale price for that electricity, and then they sell it at a retail price. But what they want to do with this new legislation that they've been able to get introduced, they want to be able to basically pay you next to nothing for that electricity. And on top of that, they want to be able to charge you a lot of onerous fees for being hooked up to the grid that you wouldn't have to pay if you just took energy from them, but you do have to pay if you send energy back to them. So it's designed to basically kill rooftop solar in the state of Florida, in the Sunshine State. And I'm at a loss at why, Jen Bradley, the senator that introduced this in the Senate, why she would carry their water. I mean, if you're a capitalist, free enterprise loving conservative, why are you carrying water for a monopoly that just wants to squash competition?
Well, or not. Well, the competition is the solar panel companies itself, correct?
Well, yeah. They would be compete. That's who FPL would see as their competition. But then it would also mean that right now only 1% of Floridians even do this, but FPL is trying to nip it in the bud because they don't want more and more people making their own electricity and selling it back to them. Their business model is they make the electricity and they sell it to you.
Right.
So they're trying to make sure that beyond just having a captive customer base and being a monopoly, that they just stomp out any type of ability of people to be independent of them. And in Florida you can't really go off grid, but your best hope is to be able to make some electricity and send it back to them and offset what they're charging you for electricity.
Well, I'm going to come back to the solar panels, but do we know why there's a rate increase? What were they asking for, and what were the reasons for that?
Well, they give a lot of reasons, but the truth is that it all hinges around their profit making. FPL spins off more profit to their parent company, Nextera, than any other Nextera subsidiary. And that money that they spin off to the parent company, most of that's not used here in Florida. Most of it is basically subsidizing Nextera's projects and companies in other states. So that's kind of the root of it. But if you get into the weeds of what they were asking for, one thing, for example, $20 million of that rate increase was put in for them to be able to pay their trade association dues. So instead of them paying it out of their profit, they want their customers to basically have to underwrite their trade association dues, which has nothing to do with them getting electricity to your home. It just increases their lobbying footprint in Tallahassee and other places.
So there's some fluff in this a little bit, I would say.
Yeah, there's plenty of fluff.
Are there any new legislation? Any new legislation out there that is part of this rate increase?
That was simply a rate case that they brought before the Public Service Commission, and so Public Service Commission is the body that oversees all that, and so you have the utilities file a rate case. The Public Service Commission has some meetings on it, and then they're supposed to independently decide whether or not that makes sense. But if you look at the track record, I don't know of any instance where the Public Service Commission has ever denied FPL a rate increase.
Well, I'm assuming that if there was one, you would know it.
Yeah, and the the thing is that these utilities, since they don't have competition, like Wendy's going up against a McDonald's or your corner gas station up against Sheetz or whatever, they don't have that competition. So the only mechanism to make them concerned about price in terms of the energy prices and what it costs to produce energy, the only mechanism is whether or not they get those rate increases. If they can get the rate increases anytime they want, then they don't care how much the electricity costs because they're passing all that cost on to their customer. It's only if the Public Service Commission is unpredictable and will occasionally say no, then they will have to really concentrate on making sure they're delivering the cheapest electricity possible to their customers.
So we've got three companies in the state of Florida, correct?
Well, three major ones, yes. There's some smaller ones, but yeah, three major ones.
And so all of them right now are asking for this, correct?
They've all got it. I mean, they asked for it in the fall, and all of them got it. And this month, January, is when you'll see those higher bills go into effect. And
So how do we combat that now?
well, you can't combat the current rate, the rate increase that's already been approved, unless like we were talking about, you put solar panels on your home,
Right.
or use less electricity. They got what they got, but the thing is there's mechanisms in there that they can keep going back to the PSC time and time again to get more and more increases. For example, the rate increase they got in the fall was increasing their base rate. They also are able to go to the PSC multiple times during the year and ask for a fuel cost adjustment, which means if the price of natural gas is higher than they expected when they figured it out, that they can then adjust midstream and pass that cost on to their customers. So they're eliminating all possible risk out of any of their decision making, which it doesn't really sound like capitalism to me.
No, but I have to say this: when you're able to do it and get away with it, it's a very smart business move.
Well, yeah, if you can get away with it. The problem is we need watchdogs in government that won't let them get away with it, because who's looking out for the ratepayer?
Right now, I'm not sure who, based on what you're telling me and the fact that they very rarely get told no.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah,
So if we're not as a community, as a state, rallying the troops on our own, how would we do that? How would we organize?
well, I think we need to put pressure on our elected officials, that we are tired of this. While the legislature can't per se, undo what the PSC just did. What they can do is they can put pressure on the PSC to not rubber stamp things going forward. They can also make sure they push back on any FPL legislation that comes up that infringes on people's right to make their own power, like what currently is up there. I mentioned earlier that net metering bill. At FPL's request, Senator Jen Bradley of District 5, she introduced this anti-net metering bill. It's SB 1024. And it is specifically designed, if you read the language, to kill rooftop solar in the state of Florida. Not only does it allow utilities to pay virtually nothing for the power that the customers send back to the grid, it also allows them to impose various sundry fees for the solar producer, the person who has solar panels on their home. But here's the kicker: FPL is not even hiding this. Records from the Florida Senate show that FPL drafted the bill, so it's their draft. Then their lobbyist, John Hawley, delivered it to Bradley, and then right after he delivered that to Bradley, Nextera gave Bradley a $10,000 campaign contribution. And then a month later, Bradley filed a bill. So this is, it looks like play to pay stuff here, right? But we cannot have our elected officials just simply being puppets for monopoly utilities.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the perfect opportunity to nip this in the bud is because what you said was probably less than 1% of the country or the state has solar panels, but they don't want everyone to have solar panels because it would be much harder to get the bill passed. It's easier now because you got 1% of the population who's going to be up in arms. The rest of us are kind of sitting back going, well, we don't have solar panels.
Yeah, and you have to ask yourself, okay, so I don't know why the lawmakers are not asking this of themselves, but or of FPL. Okay, if such a small portion of Floridians actually do this, why are we spending time on legislation to address it? It's such a minuscule issue. So it's only because FPL wants to nip it in the bud.
Right. Well, and they nip it in the bud now, and it's not going to be a big target later. Listen. I see rooftops getting changed out all the time, and the solar panels are going up. The tax breaks are there. The fact that you can get out off of their grid and have your own and give them there's too many incentives to, especially when you get a new roof put on your house, to go ahead and look at that opportunity to get solar panels on. And all these green communities now that we're looking at and starting up. A lot of these restaurants are out here putting solar panels in the adjacent lot to cut down on cost. Those things are all a budget cruncher for FP&L, Duke, and all those guys that they're not used to handling. And the best way they can handle it is to kind of cut it off.
Yeah, and up until fairly recently, if you want to put rooftop panels on your home, you had to make a pretty hefty upfront investment, which tended to discourage people. But now you have companies that are willing to lease you these things or rent to own or these other types of things where you can actually factor in your monthly cost and compare it to your electric bill. And so you can see when it makes sense.
Right.
And so the higher FPLs, the more FPL charges you for electricity, the more that makes sense. So it's almost like they're laying the groundwork to be able to continue to jack up rates without any kind of blowback on them in terms of people deciding they're going to start making their own electricity.
Well, it's I've had these conversations with people wanting to get off the grid for quite a while, and it's the grid conversation that is behind the solar panels, and the popularity of the solar panel now in comparison to 10 years ago. They're just there's more economics to it, and you're right. As long as the bill goes up, it kind of justifies that cost offset because once again, you're your own power company at that point.
Right, and solar has come a long way. There was a time not too long ago where solar didn't really make sense economically, and it had to be really heavily subsidized to do that. But just to give you an example of how far solar has come, when Jimmy Carter put those solar panels on the White House, the cost was $60 per watt. Wow. Think of a $60 light bulb. How much that would, 60-watt light bulb, how much that would cost? $60 per watt. And so they made no sense back then. The only thing they really did was cause a leak in the White House roof that Reagan had to fix. But now these things are so efficient and they're so cheap that in the U.S. Southwest, companies that build these huge solar factories or solar power plants, they're selling electricity from these plants, and this is solar plus storage. In other words, there's battery storage there too, so they can generate at nighttime as well. They're selling it for between $15 and $28 a megawatt hour on a 20-year contract. In other words, if they're giving you $15 a megawatt hour today, that's going to be your price 20 years from now. They've guaranteed it in a contract. Natural gas generation, on the other hand, cost ranges between $45 and $73 per megawatt hour. Okay, so solar is already half or less than half of the cost of natural gas generation. And some coal plants, the really old ones, see, these things, as they get old, they cost more to operate. It doesn't necessarily always have to do with the price of coal or gas. It's a lot of times it's just these plants. All these plants are 30, 40, 50 years old, and they cost more because you're always fixing something. Just like if you had a 50-year-old car.
Right.
There's some coal plants that are selling electricity for $80 a megawatt hour. So on one hand, you can get your electricity at $15 a megawatt hour. Or on the other hand, you could get it for $45 or $65 or $85 a megawatt hour. Which would you choose? So if this was a free market situation, there would be no question. Everybody would choose the cheapest form of electricity. But the utilities are not doing that, at least in Florida. In Florida, I think the percentage of solar energy generated by the power companies in Florida is somewhere around 3%. In Nevada, it's approaching 30%, and by 2030, it's going to be 50%.
Wow.
And you can go, and in Vermont, it's 15% of their power comes from solar. They don't have a lot of sun in Vermont.
Right.
Yet they can get 15% of their power from solar, but somehow in the Sunshine State, the power companies have only invested in enough to do 3%. And actually, Georgia does more solar than Florida. North Carolina does more.
Well, I know when I travel up towards the Panhandle, I see a lot of fields with solar panels in them, and I'm almost positive that's either Duke or FPL or a combination of the two.
Yeah, Duke has been in North Carolina. Duke's done quite a bit of solar, and FPL, they've done some solar in terms of megawatts of solar. They've increased it, but the increase that they have, it doesn't outstrip the growth in the demand for electricity. So they're always staying in that 2% or so range in terms of the amount of solar they put in it, in terms of what percentage it makes up of their whole
Right.
portfolio. And if you're only having 3% of the cheapest form of electricity, and natural gas makes up most of the rest, then anytime we have a spike in natural gas prices like we had recently, maybe because of something that happens in Europe or the Middle East, that automatically translates to your power bill going up.
Has there ever been a time where they've I know they keep going there and getting rate increase. Have they ever gone in and cut their rate?
No.
I had to ask that question because I thought the answer was no, but I'm just curious because based on what you're saying, when the natural gas goes up, the rate increase can go up. When the natural gas price goes down, they don't make that.
You're not going to have a reverse adjustment.
Right.
Now there is a subset of customer where their bill has went down. In the rate increase that FPL did, most people's residential customers, small businesses, all those folks, their power bill is going up by record amounts. But for FPL's top 8 customers, in terms of the biggest power users, their rate is going down, being subsidized by the residential and small business folks. So they don't tell you who those 8 customers are, but you can kind of guess. It's like Publix and some other big companies, maybe Walmart. I don't know, but these big companies, they're getting their rate per megawatt hour or kilowatt hour reduced, whereas everybody else is getting record increases.
Well, I've got a question, Marie. Can you put Bill English's question up there? It's about municipal power generation. Go ahead. I see you shaking your head, but if Marie can put that question up there.
Let's see.
Do you see a question up there on your screen?
I have not yet.
All right. It says, ask him about the municipal power incineration plant and the feasibility. Like I'm assuming that if you would build one, if a municipality would build one.
Yeah, there's been quite a bit of talk on that, and actually FPL and the other monopoly utilities, they see that as a big threat, and they're not going to. They're probably going to fight that as well when they feel like it's got enough legs to move.
Those are, but are there? Do you know if there's anybody out there that has a municipality power plant?
There, well, in Florida,
Yeah.
No, not specifically. There's talk of them. I mean, I think there's been talk of them in Tampa, and there's been talk of them in other places, um, trying to do something like that. But right now, I don't know of any that's operational.
Well, I know that there was a conversation that I had with one of the city commissioners, that there was a bill, and I don't want to get people confused with what you're talking about, but I know that there was a bill out there for an increase to come through FPL, and I want to make sure it's not part of this. Is why I'm bringing this up. Is that bill was to put the power lines from the poles into the ground, and there was legislation being written up, and I think it's through the House, maybe the Senate. I'm not sure, but I wanted to make sure and clarify what you're talking about is not Senate or House related, correct?
Well, not the rate increases. No, the rate increases. Now, FPNL just tried to justify that with all sorts of things where they cited what their cost is going to be for this or that. Most of the time, they try to blame it on new solar installations that they want to do in the future. Problem is, that doesn't really pass the smell test, because it doesn't cost. If you're trying to increase your generation to meet demand, it doesn't cost you any more to build a solar generation plant as it does to build a gas generating plant. That extra cost would only come in if you were retiring a gas plant early before its life expectancy and replacing it with solar. Then you would have these extra costs of a stranded asset. But that's not what they're doing. They're just because the demand for electricity keeps increasing, they're able to put some solar out there, but they're not reducing, the amount of gas and stuff that they're dependent on. And really the ratio pretty much has stayed the same. Only, we've never gotten above, FPNL specifically has never gotten above, I think, 2% solar. So even though they're adding more solar, they're not adding enough to actually change their energy mix and diversify their energy mix. We with our investments, we're always told to diversify our stock portfolios. You have a little bit of different things so that you're not too adversely affected if one thing, doesn't do what you want it to do. And the utilities have not been doing that. And that's what they're so heavily invested in natural gas, that anytime that natural gas price spikes, they automatically go running to the PSC and say, we need a rate increase.
Well, and I'm a little bit in this fog right now, and here's why. We've had all this talk about the footprint that we're leaving, and the climate. Mm-hmm. We're in the state of Florida. You said it yourself. I kind of feel like we're behind the times as far as solar goes. And if we're going to stomp on solar before it gets started, I'm really confused by that, first off, and why they would let that even be part of any type of conversation. I think homeowners should start to get irate at some point, because now they're going to take your rooftop away and say, even if you put that solar panel up there, you're going to get charged anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. They're trying to make it uneconomical to do that. But if you look at, Florida has the most solar irradiance of any state in the Southeast, more than Georgia, more than North Carolina, South Carolina, Mississippi, whatever. If you look at the map, it's dark orange all across Florida because you get more solar. To get that level of solar anywhere else in the country, you have to be in Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, Southern California. And every one of those states that have similar levels of solar irradiance are going all in on solar because they know it's the cheapest form of electricity and that they can produce a lot of it because they get all that sunshine. The one outlier is Florida. They're not doing it. Just an example, the state of Nevada, they passed a bill a couple years ago that would require that the utilities get 50% of their electricity from solar or other renewable sources by 2030. Okay, so that's just 8 years from now.
Right.
That bill passed unanimously with every single Republican voting for it and every single Democrat voting for it in both the House and the Senate. Because, you know why?
Why?
Because they understood the economics. They could make all that power at home, no fuel cost, sun's free. They're not relying on it being piped in from North Dakota or Utah or somewhere else. And it was the cheapest thing for ratepayers. So that made sense. So once they understood the economics, everybody was in. There's nothing controversial about it.
So in order to stop some of this, it seems like we have to get started. Do you suggest that they contact you at your website, or?
Well, yeah, we if you go to our Action Center page on our website, you will see this hold FP&L accountable, and that will allow you to access letters that you can send to your state representative or your state senator, pushing back on these pieces of legislation, SB 1024 in the Senate and HB what's the one in the House? 741 in the House, pushing back on them and saying, look, we want to be able to put solar panels on our roof. We want it to be economical. We have to have some kind of recourse to insulate ourselves against these constant rate increases by these monopoly utilities. And, put pressure on your representative or senator to oppose these things and try to kill them. Because if they go through, then, where's our recourse? The solar panel thing, not many people are taking advantage of it, and it's small right now, but at least we'll have the recourse that we can do.
Well, here's the thing: it's small right now, and you can say that, but the trend of where this is all going is what they're trying to prevent.
Exactly.
Because if costs are coming down on solar panels, they don't want the cost coming down on solar panels, so you know about it, so that you put it on your roof.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the government's giving tax deductions right now and incentives to go ahead and get that stuff done. I don't know how long that's going to last, but the way things are going, I think it'll last quite a while. And if they can stop it at the state level, that's going to prevent solar panels in the state of Florida, other than the big players that are out there that like Disney's and things like that it doesn't really matter what they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the actual cost of solar panels and solar energy is projected to continue to decline. Now, once in a while you may have something happen that spikes it very briefly, but in general, the trend is downward. Even though it's the cheapest stuff now, it's going to be even cheaper in 5 or 10 years.
Right.
And so the only way that it can become cost prohibitive is if utilities like FP&L slap on these extra fees and not allow you, make sure that they don't have to pay you anything for the electricity you generate, that the excess electricity that goes back on the grid.
So sort of like your cable bill. When you get your cable bill's $69, and when you go to pay it, it's $129 because all the extra fees that are going to be on there.
Exactly.
And they've got to recoup. And I know why they're doing it. They're shutting it down, and two, and you're right. I can't believe that we're falling for this at the House and Senate level, if they even attempt it. But stranger things have happened when you have donations coming in. I'm sure, but the whole thing is we're we are the Sunshine State. And there are a lot of people right now taking advantage of it. And I threw Disney out there. Disney already has a solar field.
Mm-hmm.
They already do. You can see it from I-4. And so these big companies that they're not targeting them. They're targeting the households.
Exactly. They're working out deals with the big companies, because those companies, even with the solar and stuff, either the solar is owned by the utility, so then they still get it running through them, or if it is separate, they have side deals that cut where they still know that the company's going to be buying a lot of electricity from them. So that there's probably upper limits and things like that on that. But yeah, the people getting hosed on this is small businesses and homeowners,
Right.
and we seem to have no recourse. And really, our only recourse is to be so mad at FP&L and what they're doing, that we make sure that our lawmakers, whatever their political stripes, are not going around doing the bidding of FP&L, and that they put a stop to some of this stuff.
Well, and how do you get them to stop? You get a hold of your senators, your congressmen, and you get letters out to them, right?
Yeah.
Or go ahead.
Yeah, and it matters with your lawmaker, sort of what your political persuasion is. So if you're represented by a Republican or conservative, then they need to hear from fellow Republicans and conservatives. If you're represented by a Democrat, they need to hear from fellow Democrats more than anything else, because those are the voices that worry them the most. So if they get a bunch of pushback and people saying, "Hey, I don't want you to do this. This is you're carrying water for a monopoly that's trying to squash competition. How on earth can you call yourself a free enterprise loving conservative or whatever?" Or on the other side, or why are you not looking out for homeowners and small businesses and just letting these monopolies run wild? And if they get enough feedback on that, despite all the campaign money that gets poured into their campaigns, I would think it would give them pause. They would say, "Okay, I'm really upsetting my constituency here, the people that I need to get reelected, and I can't assume that this is all going to they're going to forget about this come election time."
Well, the rate increases, I know they never take them back. Okay, but this time of and I say year, I don't mean year, but this time on our nation, where we've got supply chain issues, we don't feel the job pain so much in the state of Florida because we're open, thanks to Santas. So we've got the working class is working, everything is moving forward. The problem is even though the working class is working, everybody's attacking $20 here, $20 there. And before you know it, the even though you're working, I'm going to say this because we're blessed to be working. What's going to happen for those who aren't working or retired, who are on fixed budgets,
fixed income?
Yeah, and so it's going to be tough for them.
Yeah, and one of the great things about solar is that as we've seen with gasoline and natural gas, the prices, when you're relying on things that are produced far away, whether it's in North Dakota for oil or whether it's in Saudi Arabia for oil, when you're relying on those things from far away, supply chain disruptions, events happening in other parts of the world or the country, weather in North Dakota, whatever, all these different things can affect your price. But if you're producing solar that's coming into your state, you're not relying on outside folks, and you're not subject to those kind of supply chain disruptions in terms of the price. So the very mechanisms that make your gas price go up 30% or your electricity price go up, if you were relying more on solar, those are not issues. You know what your cost is, And not only is it cheaper than some of the other things, but it's predictable. You're gonna have the same or lower going forward.
And go ahead and give your contact information again, David.
Sure, it's David Jenkins. I'm at djenkins@conservativestewards.org, and you can find that on our website, conservativestewards.org. The action alerts posted up there. I mean, you can see it. Well, if you're on Facebook, you can see it on the screen. But just go to our action center. You'll see the hold FP&L accountable, and that allows you to go in and access a real easy to send letter, and you can modify it or you can send it as is. I always encourage people to modify them, but so they're more personalized. But start banging the drum on this. Otherwise, we're just sitting and taking it.
And I think we all need, and I want to say this because when I saw this topic come across from Tammy, I thought, conservatives, this is both sides. The last time I checked, whether you're conservative or Democrat, we all own houses. Mm-hmm. This is about everybody's wallet at this point, and I think in the future, whether we're looking at a solar panel now for our houses, or if we're going to look at them in the future, if we don't do something now, we're going to be put in a situation later that we could have prevented.
Exactly. We won't have the option won't be there for us down the road.
No, they're gonna make sure they block this down and lock it down pretty tight. I don't know the incentive then, because I've talked to people who have solar panels on their house. We have a community down the road from us that is a complete self-contained community. They have their own electrical panels. Everything is up and running. So I also believe that is another reason they want to block this, is that they can see these communities in the middle of the state opening up and really not having FPL or Duke or any of them in there, and they're going to have they're going to be green communities. Mm-hmm. And everything is about numbers. I maybe we should have started out there first, but it truly is about FP&L and Duke. It's about their bottom line, and it's about their vision for the future. And their vision for the future doesn't really contain the footprint of solar panels on our houses where they make less money.
Yeah, their business model doesn't work really well if that takes off.
So it's going to be tough. The information that you provided today, it's out there. It's on the website. The phone number, can I go ahead and give that out and say?
Oh, sure.
Call.
Sure.
David's phone number is 703-785-9570. You guys check this site out, participate in what he's talking about. Do your own investigation on it. Learn. This is why we talk about all this, and this is really coming from a different resource outside of our community. So you're actually talking to us from West Virginia, right? Or Virginia?
Northern Virginia, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Northern Virginia, and so you're on top of this for the state of Florida.
Yeah, we actually have a staffer in Florida now, and we're working. We spend most of our time working on Florida issues because Florida is so far behind other states. It defies logic that the Sunshine State is so far behind on this stuff.
How? Well, I don't want to say how can we catch up, because we already know that. They just have to invest more into what they're doing there, and maybe we all need to look at. I live in a not a real gated community, but enclosed community. And I wish that our community as a whole, it's a lot of seniors here. I wish they would look at putting panels up on our roofs here, especially right now before this goes through, because that could cover a lot of costs for people down the road.
Or the state legislature could deregulate the energy market and bring in more competition. That would help. Yep. Or they could do like Nevada did and have a a clean energy standard or renewable standard where they require FPL to eventually get like a third of their electricity from renewable sources, or at least sources other than what they currently are invested in, because that is a financial loser for ratepayers.
Right. So, what other projects? And I don't want to divert any time. We've been talking about this for about 45 minutes. But what are some of the other projects that your group targets and kind of keeps an eye out on?
Yeah, well, lately we've been focused a good deal on oil and gas leasing across the country. There's another problem in terms of taxpayers kind of getting the raw end of the deal, where these oil and gas companies, when they're allowed to drill wells, when they get a permit, they commit to cleaning that well up after they're finished. In other words, when they're done using it, they plug it and they're supposed to plug it and reclaim it, and they promise to do that as a condition of their lease and their permit. Well, we have hundreds of thousands of these wells that have been abandoned by these companies because they're reneging on their promise to clean them up. Because once they're done getting the gas out of the ground, or gas or oil, they don't want anything to do with them. So what a lot of them will do is that they will declare, the company that technically was producing the oil will declare bankruptcy, and then they're out of that liability, and then they pop up with the same principles under a different name.
Right.
And so that leaves us taxpayers on the hook for all the cleanup costs. We're talking billions in cleanup costs that other people promised to do. They promised to clean up their mess, and yet they're leaving us holding the bag. So that's another thing that, and the Biden administration could fix that right now if they would increase the bonding requirements. So these companies have to post an adequate bond to cover the cost of reclamation if they default on their obligations. They have the authority to do that right now administratively. They don't have to wait on Congress. So those kind of things as well. We go around Florida talking to more conservative groups and trying to explain these energy issues and how it's changed over the years, the climate impacts on Florida, and why conservatives need to be engaged. I always say, if conservatives are not engaged in finding real solutions, then we're leaving it to the left to come up with all the solutions, and we might not like those solutions. But so we need to be on the playing field with conservative ideals on how to solve these problems. All political stripes were on the playing field when we passed our environmental landmark legislation back in the 70s, Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act. All those bills had near unanimous bipartisan support.
Right.
We have to get to that same place again, because we all live here, and protecting what we have is protecting the status quo. And if you like the status quo, and you like to go hunting or fishing, or you like the fact that we have pollinators like bumblebees and butterflies to pollinate our crops so we have food, you need to be in the game.
Right. Well, you brought a couple points up there that I want to quickly ask you about. We've got maybe about 7 minutes left. Mm-hmm. And maybe you tipped your hand. When was the last time we actually worked together as two parties to really get that done? Was that back in the 70s, or has that happened since then?
Oh, it's happened since then. The Clean Air Act amendments of the early 90s that dealt with acid rain.
Yep.
That was proposed by the Bush administration, and had been worked on by the Reagan administration before, but they didn't get it quite finished before he had to leave office. But the first Bush administration pushed that through, and had bipartisan support in the House and Senate, and it solved the problem. It solved acid rain. I mean, you don't hear about acid rain anymore, because it was a market-based program that had conservative input, and that they traded credits. The polluters had to buy credits from the ones that do a better job, and they let the market fix the problem. We need ideas like that. We need the ideas that leverage the market to solve problems, not like a lot of times on the left happens, is that the policies are designed to kind of run upstream of the market. but you can leverage the market, especially like the energy issues we've just been talking about. The market favors the cleaner forms of energy right now. Used to, if you want to talk about climate change, you had a couple of bad options. You could not do anything and have bigger climate issues, or you could do something that raised everybody's electricity and energy costs. Today, the market's changed. So now actually solving the problem results in cheaper electricity bills, cheaper energy bills. So the whole situation has changed, and we can't, people can't just keep using the same rhetoric they were using 10 years ago, because technology's changed, the market's changed, and we have to roll with it.
Well, and technology, talking about that, technology is really why we're talking about this right now. Is because if we wouldn't have had the advances in solar panels, the show probably wouldn't have happened. Mm-hmm. Just because you gave that example of the White House having solar panels at what, $60 a watt? Yeah. So when you kind of sit back and you realize that, yes, technology, and I think of it this way: there are people in our United States that technology has passed them by. Well, if we sit back and do nothing, so will the situations that we may have presented to us later on. Because if we sit back and let this technology be taken advantage of by FPL and Duke and get them off the rooftops and get our rooftops. Now think about this, our rooftops, our energy from our rooftops and their control. What's wrong with that picture?
Well, I know. And then any libertarian out there who wants to be more energy independent and off the grid, if this legislation passes, they can pretty much kiss that opportunity goodbye.
Right. So there's a big opportunity here, I think, for really both parties. And I'm glad you said, Democrats should contact Democrats and Republicans should contact Republicans. And it's not because you're wanting to divide it off. It's that power of contact means so much more in that group, right?
Yeah, and this issue affects everybody. So you need to do that. And the other thing is, the big problem is that most of these folks are just used to doing FPL's bidding, and it doesn't matter whether they're Democrat or Republican, they're doing it. And I don't know how much you've heard about, but I mean, there's crazy things like FPL putting up money for ghost candidates and all sorts of weird stuff. These folks have to be reined in. Otherwise, it's the average Floridian, the ratepayers, that are just going to continue to get a worse situation.
Well, I always love it when you see rate increases and then you see donations behind it, or you look at the number and you're like, well, that wasn't from FPL. That was from all of us.
Yeah. Well, and they don't even hide that kind of pay to play stuff anymore. They're so arrogant about it. They do it right out in the open. I mean, why would you send a campaign contribution immediately after you've sent somebody legislation you want introduced? Why wouldn't you wait 6 months or something? I mean, to disguise it a little bit. They don't care.
Well, I think that's something that's been gone for a while now. And I'm going to throw a football thing in there just because I can at this point. We are now paying college football players sometimes more than their coaches in college to play football at college from high school. That's a scary thought. I understand what they're doing. I get it. But when opportunities just present themselves, the NCAA had a chance to write some regulations to prevent how this is all being played out right now, and they didn't do it. So it's kind of the reverse. We're getting ready to get zapped by regulations that are going to prevent us, the consumer, from being paid for the electric that we produce off of our own rooftop.
Yeah, it's a monopoly model, and they're taking that to the biggest extreme that they can in terms of making sure that nobody can make their own electricity and do so in a profitable way. And there's plenty of other states where you can get off the grid. Arizona, there's talk show hosts that I know of that are completely off the grid, They make all their own electricity, and they love it. They don't have to. They can just they can tell the utility to just go pound dirt,
Right.
and they like that. And it's a shame that that kind of opportunity is about to be foreclosed in the state of Florida.
Yeah, it's a bad thing for the state of Florida, I think. So contact CRS online and conservatives, conservativestewards.org, and get that letter out. I'm running short on time, but David Jenkins, thank you so much for being a participant today, and I really hope you'll come back again. I love having an outside look into what's happening in the world.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. Appreciate it. It's been fun.
All right. Well, have a great day. We'll talk to you soon. This is John Rawlings. Drive safe on your way home and have a great day. This is